there is a
Go ahead.
deadline today.
Yeah.
It's very immensely important. And this deadline was basically set not only by Iran, but also by China. And that's why this is so immense. Okay, let's break it down before we get to the big thing that already happened today, which is the Yemeni armed forces announcing effective immediately a total maritime blockade of Saudi Arabia. This turns the whole chessboard upside down. Before we get there, very important. Why D-Day today, July 20, is so important? In the past during the past week, the Chinese were meeting with the Pakistani mediators, and of course, they were talking their own channels of communication with Iran, which is a strategic ally of China as well, as much as Pakistan. And the Chinese were basically telling the Pakistani negotiators, look, that's it. You have to do anything in the book, outside the book, a book that you're going to borrow, intergalactic book, whatever. You need to have some sort of understanding until July 20. So you can get both sides back on the table. Well, this is it's beyond a tall order. It's virtually impossible. They did try everything via the direct negotiations that the top of the Pakistani government has with Iran, and that includes they have a channel where communications arrive directly at the table of leader Mustafa Khamenei. Very few actors. Well, in Iran itself, not many, and around the world, you can count, three or four, not even that, maybe two. One of them is the field marshal, Pakistani field marshal, the chief of the army, Asim Munir. And we get very good specific intel virtually every day, Larry and myself, on our channel, Transition Protocol, of what they are actually doing, and of course, the immense pressure they are in. So essentially, what is happening is that Trump, bragging all the time that he is bombing Iran every day, harder and harder every day, and of course, hitting civilian infrastructure. We discussed this last week. In the back channels, he is begging, and I repeat, begging. And this is not the exact words of our sources, but they basically said, look, he's calling Asim Munir every day. Okay, get me some sort of understanding of promise of whatever to get the Iranians back on the table. And as you know very well, Nima, and many of you in our audience, Iran has absolutely no interest in getting back at the table. Which table? And getting back for what? They destroyed the whole memorandum of understanding. They practically destroyed all 14 points of the memorandum of understanding. The trustworthiness of the Trump administration in Tehran is less than zero. In the political vector, and of course, much more in the military vector, and even more if you go all around Iran, around the Iranian population, everywhere. It's a national consensus. You cannot trust the Americans per se as negotiators, and especially this administration. So it's up to the Pakistanis, with help from the Qataris, to try to find some Hail Mary pass of crystal ball, magic ball, or whatever to juggle to convince Tehran to go back to the negotiations. But then it gets even more complicated, because then we have two official vectors in Tehran. And correct me if I'm wrong, Anima. Arakshi has been saying publicly, look, even if there is a very tiny chance of some sort of negotiations, of course, we don't isolate negotiations per se. We'll keep going. But this is the diplomatic way of saying, look, we tried everything. Of course, there's nothing like zero diplomacy. It doesn't exist. It exists for the Americans, not for Iran, not for other members of the global south, not for Russia, not for China, etc. We will keep trying, but of course, the prospects are dire. And of course, on the military level, it's more or less obvious that the decisions have already been made. And the response by Iran on the American for the American attacks, it's 2-1, and in some cases it's 3-1. And the intensity of the Iranian response is absolutely devastating. Of course, the United States, because this is a bunch of cowards and grifters, they are attacking Iranian infrastructure. But Iran, even not attacking GCC infrastructure, they are concentrating on the American bases. If they keep going at this rate, 2 or 3 or 4 of these bases in 1 week or so, they'll be totally devastated. The bases, for instance, in Jordan, they are being meticulously devastated, hangar by hangar. So this is where we're heading. We are in the middle of the escalation ladder. And at the same time, we have this deadline, which was it will expire today, by the end of today, July 20, Monday. The Chinese telling the Pakistanis, do everything you can to try to get them back on the table. And the Iran deadline, expressed once again via the Pakistanis and the Qataris to the Trump administration, if you continue to bomb Iranian civilian infrastructure, all the GCC actors will pay. So that's it. We have only a few hours ahead of us for the end of the deadline. And then all bets are off. And if all that was not enough, Nima, which is the craziest thing, this is the day that the Yemeni armed forces, Ansar Allah, picked to install their blockade for blockade, siege for siege. And they're absolutely right to do so, because Yemen has been under siege for almost 12 years by Saudi Arabia, which the absolute majority of the planet has no idea about that. This is something that you only notice when you actually go to Yemen and you see the results of the blockade. So that's it. So now all bets are off. What is Saudi Arabia, now totally cornered, is going to do when they cannot export 4.5 million barrels or more of oil from the Yanbu port in the Red Sea? Because now the Red Sea is, for all practical purposes, blockaded to Saudi Arabia, Saudi ships, Saudi communications, including, of course, obviously, the Bab al-Mandeb, the nuclear joker. What will be the Pakistani response? Because Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they have a military pact. Will the Pakistanis intervene against Yemen directly on behalf of Saudi Arabia? And then their credibility as mediators disappears completely. All the efforts that they put this past 2 months, mostly, 24/7, non-stop, to be trusted mediators between the Iranians. So they got the trust of the Iranians all the way to Moshtaba. And the Americans will vanish with one single move. So that's why this day today is so dangerous. The repercussions of everything that is happening today will be, in fact, they will be absolutely essential to formulate how this war is going to proceed and how it might end, in fact.
Yeah. Actually, the blockade is in effect as we talk on Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Immediately.
Correct.
And they're asking all these ships and vessels that are proceeding through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden not to dock at Saudi ports. This is hugely important, because if Saudi Arabia decides to back down, says, I'm not gonna do it, we're gonna remove, we're gonna withdraw, or we're gonna we're gonna come out with a new policy, the siege is removed and you're not gonna be under siege anymore, that's gonna be a humiliation for Saudi Arabia.
Enormous. Exactly.
if they attack Yemen, that's going to be disastrous for their oil facilities and the way that they're trying to somehow manage exporting oil using the Red Sea. So the only option that I see, maybe behind the scene, talking with the Ansarullah, no, we're gonna remove the siege, you're gonna remove the blockade on us, and we're gonna be good. We're gonna get along. But I don't see the Yemenis getting along with that.
No,
What is your feeling on that?
you're right, Nima. There could be some sort of arrangement behind the scenes where Saudi Arabia does not vocally and officially and in public admits that their siege is over. But this implies ultra heavy metal diplomacy between Riyadh and Sana'a, which is not happening at all. And there's no evidence anywhere that this will start to happen today. But as you said, it's the only way out, especially if Saudi Arabia attacks Yemen, Pakistan will attack Yemen. And then all bets are off. And then MOU, ceasefire, all that. The whole thing, the whole house of cards collapses. And of course, the Saudis cannot do anything. Can you imagine Saudi Arabia going in public and recognizing that they have been applying an illegal blockade of Yemen for the past 11 years and a half? No, they'll never do that. We know this is basically a one-man dictatorship with a lot of court princes fighting among themselves between Riyadh and Jeddah. Politically, it's as filthy as it gets. In terms of decision making, depends on one man. And as we all know, it's another megalomaniac narcissist. So the prospects are absolutely dire. But the key information, in fact, Nima, which is something that I had the privilege to confirm with my ultra top Yemen source only a few minutes ago. He confirmed that, yes, maybe we didn't want to do it now. We were holding our nuclear card to the right moment, which would be along the way in this war, blocking the Bab al-Mandab and blocking the Bab al-Mandab for good. This is blocking the Bab al-Mandab to Saudi Arabia. Everybody else, in theory, no problem. So this is very specific. And when you read the official Yemen Armed Forces communique, it's a siege for a siege, which makes total sense. They have been under siege for 11, almost 12 years. I'm sure many of you know that the only way for anyone to fly into Sana'a, there's only one possibility. You have to fly Yemen Airways, which until last year they had planes. They don't have anymore. Why? Because all the planes were bombed by the Death Cult, by Israel last year. So there are no more Yemen Airways planes. Until last year, when we still had a chance to visit, you go to Jordan, which is the only authorized landing spot, departure port anywhere on the planet, airport anywhere on the planet. You fly to Amman Airport. You go through a relatively not straightforward bureaucracy. You get your boarding card over there, and then you can board your flight from Amman to Sana'a, and then vice versa. From Sana'a, you can only fly back to Amman. So this has nothing to do with Royal Jordanian, nothing. This was a deal between the Kingdom of Jordan and Sana'a, Ansar Allah, the government in Sana'a. So this was a blockade. By all means, it was a blockade. And of course, a maritime blockade of Yemeni ships as well. So now Yemen is returning the favor. Let's see how Saudi Arabia lives with that. Let's see how they live with all that oil from the East-West pipeline, being loaded in Yanbu ports won't be able to move. So if we had real diplomacy working around the GCC, this could have been solved diplomatically. Impossible. If the other GCC members were not so cowardly as they are, this could have been solved as well. So now, this is the old game. The new game is that you impose a blockade on us, we impose a blockade on you. Live with it. And of course, Tehran is watching this very, very carefully, because now, in practice, we have a blockaded Strait of Hormuz by the Americans, not by Iran. By Iran, if you follow the IRGC Navy coordinates, and if you follow the new authority, the PGSA, you can transit through Hormuz with no problems. You have to just follow the new bureaucracy. Hormuz and other Iranian ports are blocked by the Americans. So now the Yemenis block a port. They block all Arabian ports as well, which implies they are blocking the Bab al-Mandeb for Saudi Arabia. So that's, this is really highway to hell. We are right in the middle of it, Nima. And it's immensely dangerous, starting today already. And obviously, what can the administration of Narcissus drowned, Neocrassus, baboon of Barbaria, whatever name you want to call them, what can they do about it? No, there's nothing they can do about it. We already know when the Yemenis kicked the asses of the largest naval armada in the history of the universe. They can do that again. And if it's blocked to Saudi Arabia, it will be blocked to the Americans as well. Let's have an American aircraft carrier trying to block this blockade, coming from Suez, for instance. So it's terrifying how it always if he can go downhill, it will go downhill, which was what we were expecting last week, right? Okay, there is this deadline until Monday. During the weekend, they work the phones 24/7. They will come up with something. In fact, there was something on the table, it's something that Larry and I discussed yesterday on Sunday night. We did a special show, and we discussed this on our show. That Pakistan has 2 or 3 extra amends on top of the MOU to get both back on the table. But that's not the real story. These are not amends. What Pakistan is proposing is what is already in the MOU broken by the Americans, including the end of all wars, and including the war against Lebanon, against militias in Iraq, you name it, against Hezbollah, etc. And of course, starting mechanisms for the Americans fulfilling the commitments that they said they would fulfill in the MOU. So there's nothing new about that. And of course, this follows the Chinese diplomatic drive, which is basically, look, we're not going to renegotiate anything new. We're basically telling you, Pakistan, do anything you want, because it's in your interest and in our interest, Chinese interest as well, for the Americans to start fulfilling the MOU. This is it. Back to the negotiating table means fulfilling the MOU. But at the same time, we have the Iranians officially saying we're out of the MOU as it stands because they blew it up. And now everything is bilateral. Commitments are bilateral. If one side breaks it, the other side may break it as well. This is exactly what happened. The Americans broke it. The Iranians say, okay, we're also breaking it. So if you return to negotiating table, you're going to return to what? There's only one game in town. Back to the mutually approved MOU. Are the Americans ready to do that? Obviously, no. So it's a total impasse, Nima. There's nowhere to go. And now Yemen, they introduced a new now they introduced the move that buy. Okay, let's go for bro.